Hey Steve, in your best opinion, do you think it's likely January and February will also be a flex? I totally understand it's almost 5 months of estimating. Yeah, I do. I do think January and February will also be flexes. I've been predicting that pretty much every LSAT in 2020 will be a flex, which of course they all have been, and I don't see a coronavirus vaccine coming out anytime soon. So do I think coronavirus will still be an issue 5 months from now, speaking in early to mid-September? Yeah, I do. So I do think January and February will be flex. And at this point, it seems reasonable to me to predict that LSAC will make the LSAT flex forever. Maybe not with only 3 sections. Of course, they do need to test out future questions with the experimental sections. So I do think they will probably add on at least one more section at some point and allow breaks at some point for standard test takers as well, not just accommodated ones with extra time. But yeah, I think speaking now in early September, that LSAC will announce that both January and February will be flexes sometime in the next few months. They were announcing their decisions approximately 6 weeks prior, but then they threw us all for a loop and announced on the November one over 2 months prior. So they may announce for January and February sooner than 6 weeks prior. We'll see what happens, but short answer is yes, I do. Young Cash App is asking, let's see, do law schools average multiple scores? That's pretty much the takeaway here. This person was commenting on a video about a 1-month retake LSAT study schedule. But the question was, do law schools average scores, and is that a new policy? In the US, they do not average multiple LSAT scores. There are a couple of schools that claim to consider multiple, but in reality, they all take the highest. That's what they have incentive to consider when it comes down to things at the end of the day. Will those additional scores provide some context? Maybe. And yeah, Canada is a totally different situation. In Canada, there are some schools that average multiple, but in the US, due to the influence of the US News Law School rankings, which take their info from the ABA, and the ABA, the American Bar Association, they take the highest LSAT score of matriculating students. And so that's what law schools have an incentive to consider when deciding who to admit. And this has been a policy change going back to 2006, when the American Bar Association changed what they take in from the average of multiple LSAT scores to the highest of multiple LSAT scores. So they consider the highest score is the answer there. Mod My Stuff is asking, so if I had extra time and a half on the regular LSAT, will I get the same for the flex version? Yes, you do. Whatever accommodations you get for the regular LSAT, you will also get for the LSAT flex. It's automatic, nothing to worry about. Follow up. If yes, then do they allow a bathroom break, or are you supposed to sit for the full time? If you have extra time on the flex, you do get a bathroom break, unlike regular flex administrations, which are 3 sections back to back with only a quick 1-minute break in between those sections, during which you are not allowed to leave the field of view of the camera. I've heard some anecdotes online of people, peeing in diapers and such. Is that possible? Yeah, of course. Don't expose yourself to the proctors. Definitely don't do that. But there are people who find ways to creatively relieve themselves without leaving the view of the camera. Like I said earlier, if they do include experimental sections on the flex and then expand it to at least 4 sections, if not 5, then presumably they will allow a bathroom break at some point, maybe after section 2, maybe after section 3, but they do understand the limits of the human body. They understand that nerves can cause people to need to go to the bathroom. And so while I wish they allowed bathroom breaks in the current format, I do expect that long term they would allow them for the flex. And if you have extra time, again, you do get bathroom breaks. Next comment, next question, LOL. My tutor put in my personal statement that my father was an attorney, but he was not. Is this okay? No. Will this be a big deal? Yes. Do not lie on your personal statement. Do not lie in your application. And why is your tutor putting things in your personal statement? Why don't you write your personal statement for yourself? And then on top of that, why is anybody lying in their statements? I don't understand why you would do that. This could pose a huge problem for you when you go up for admission to the bar down the line. They do detailed background checks on things. And yeah, it's just a huge red flag to me. There's a huge ethical concern. Why is somebody else making major changes to your personal statement and including things that are not even true? It's okay to get help in terms of editing, grammar, punctuation, spelling, and even feedback on how to structure your personal statement. I certainly help many of my students crafting their personal statements, but I don't write them for anybody, and I certainly don't suggest including things that are not true or making things up. So this is a huge deal. Take that out, please. Stick to the facts. Don't try to put things in because you think it's going to impress anybody. You could go through 3 years of law school and then go for admission to the bar. They find out you were lying, and then you never get to practice law, and you wasted 3 years of your life and a ton of money. So definitely don't do that. William says, do you think there is any historical evidence to support that LSAC may make the November and January LSATs more difficult than the August and October ones to weed out people trying to take the test at the end of the cycle and apply last minute? No, LSAC doesn't really care when you take the LSAT. They don't care if you apply last minute or if you apply in the middle of the cycle or if you apply early. And of course, somebody could take the LSAT in November or January and apply the following cycle at the beginning, way ahead of the game. And so I think there's an implicit assumption in this question that I don't agree with to start. Then secondly, though, as to directly address the actual question here, no one LSAT test date is any easier or harder than another. LSATs are equated. So even if the raw score conversions are a bit different from exam to exam, aka the curve, they adjust them to account for differences in test difficulty between different test forms. Also, not everybody's taking the exact same LSAT. That's always been the case. So for example, pre-flex, pre-COVID, if you can remember such a time, even the people taking, let's say, the September LSAT, some years it was in September, there are others taking it, some would take it on the Saturday, others take the Monday Sabbath Observers Administration. Others have special accommodated test-taking situations that require they take it at a different day and time, different proctoring, maybe a different test form. Then in cases of inclement weather or some other issue, they would have retakes with different test forms. Now for the flex, and then there's also overseas or international test takers, I should mention as well, who were getting different test forms as well, because you don't want people halfway around the world taking advantage of time differences to facilitate cheating or sharing of information. Also for the flex now, there are multiple test forms and mixing and matching even on the exact same day. So there could be one person taking the old undisclosed February 2005 exam, somebody else taking a different undisclosed exam from a totally different year. So lots of mixing and matching, lots of different test forms. And again, no one test form is meant to be any difficult or easier than another, and the raw score conversions, aka the curve, account for that. Nikki is asking, with the new digital LSAT, how might the test writers, meaning the test takers, I assume this person is Canadian, be able to strategically choose a question order? Do you think it would take too much time to go through the questions, figure out which order to do them in, write down that question order, perhaps on a piece of paper, and then complete the questions in that order? Yeah, I do think that would take too much time. Definitely if you're going so far as to write down that question order. The test is very strictly timed. It's actually unreasonable to be able to do everything in the time allotted, which is why the test is so difficult for so many people. So you've got a big time crunch. Don't waste time choosing the order. Just do things in the order given. If you encounter a difficult question, you might want to flag it, skip it, hope to come back to it later. And if that's an issue for you, which it is for many people, really do work on your pacing. And yeah, so basically, if you encounter something difficult, skip it, come back to it. That's really the major way in which I would adjust question order. I've also talked at many different times about doing logic games questions within a game in a certain order, or logical reason or reading comp questions within a passage in a certain order. And that might involve a little bit of skipping around, but I wouldn't actually write down the order and jump around in that way in terms of difficulty. I would skip things, come back to them within a game, within a passage, but that's as far as I'll go on that. I wouldn't go through and say, okay, well, I'm going to do game 3 first, then game 2, then game 4, then game 1, or reading comp passage 1 third and reading comp passage number 2 fourth and such. That just gets way too complicated. Also got a related question on the same video from Kelly asking, are you saying only highlight where there is viewpoint or evidence, or just write it down on scratch paper and don't highlight at all. So I think in this video, I was probably talking about maybe how you might use LSAC's highlighting annotation tool on the digital and flex LSATs built into the software. And you can see this, by the way, on LSAC's Law Hub, aka Official LSAT Prep Plus. So if you were going to highlight, maybe I would say only highlight the major viewpoint, meaning the author's opinion, wherever they might express that. I wouldn't highlight evidence ever. And ideally, I think I would recommend only noting things on the scratch paper to the side, simply summarizing the main idea, the author's opinion, maybe making brief paragraph summaries with just a few keywords, but ultimately do what works for you. Experiment. Don't just highlight because I say to highlight or I toss it as one potential idea in a video. Try out different things, see what works for you. But yeah, I would keep any note-taking or highlighting and underlining extremely minimal. Jada's asking, hey Steve, what if you find it generally more difficult to read on the monitor? I do better on paper than digital. I get what you mean. I also prefer reading things on paper than on a screen by default, but the LSAT is what it is. Now with the Flex, everybody in the world, with very few exceptions for accommodated test takers, is doing it on a screen of some sort. And then even if we ever do go back to the digital LSAT on a tablet, most people, if not all, by the time they roll it out to international students, will be doing it on a screen of some sort. So if you find it more difficult, I feel you. You've just got to practice. You've just got to get used to reading difficult, dense text on screen. I recommend a couple of tools to do this. One of them is simply, of course, just reading difficult articles on screen from The Economist, Scientific American, Arts and Letters Daily, or even better, reading actual LSAT passages on a screen using Law Hub, aka Official LSAT Prep Plus, or if you have the PDFs, using that alternatively. You could also copy-paste difficult dense text into programs like Spreeder and phrasereader.com that allow you to determine the speed at which you read those passages. It kind of puts you on a reading comp treadmill where you're displaying the words in that text at, let's say, 300 words per minute or 400 words per minute, and you can adjust it in increments of maybe 5 words a minute or 25 words a minute and get used to reading it faster and faster and getting comfortable with reading it on a screen at that speed. So just basically try it out. Exposure therapy is the best medicine in this case. Just get accustomed to it. Lauren says, hi Steve, I've watched a lot of your videos and they are incredibly helpful. Well, thank you. That's really my goal with this. I'm planning on taking the upcoming October and November LSATs and applying to law schools for admission in the fall of 2021. I was wondering what your thoughts are on applying to law schools given this situation, when I'll have my October LSAT score on the applications, but not my November one yet. I'm applying to schools in Canada where the deadlines for applications are mostly due November 1st. Okay, so apply to law schools after you've gotten all your LSAT scores back. If you want them to consider you with your November LSAT score, then I wouldn't apply until your November LSAT score comes back. Otherwise, they won't be able to consider your application until it's complete, and they might be waiting for that score. That poses a problem when applications you say are mostly due November 1st. So I would double check if they actually are due November 1st, or if maybe they are willing to, in some cases, wait for those November LSAT scores to come back. If they're not, then there's no really point in taking the November LSAT if you are planning to apply to law schools only in Canada, because then you'd be after the deadline. You don't want to have to wait a year, obviously. But the American law schools, I think pretty much all of them, I can't imagine any exceptions to this, all of them will accept November LSAT scores. Maybe not for special early decision or early binding programs or even unbinding ones, but for regular decision applications, they typically in the US, I can't think of any exceptions again, they will take November LSAT scores without a doubt. So I would double check the Canadian situation. I'm not an expert on the Canadian law school admission process in particular, but in general, you've got to wait to apply until you actually get all of your scores back. Otherwise, even if you apply, they'll still be holding and waiting for that LSAT score, or even worse, if they get things mixed up, they might actually evaluate your application and make a decision on it in the absence of that November LSAT score, in which case you're only being considered with the October LSAT score, and so I wouldn't want you counting on that one. But that's all I have to say on that. Reach out to the schools and see what they have to say regarding this. I'd be surprised if they aren't willing to wait for November LSAT scores, but schools are free to set their own policies. Latoya, not sure how to pronounce that, saying, thank you for this video. I'm taking the November test and wondering when to apply since the application cycle is open now. Well, that ties in pretty well to my previous question. If you're taking November LSAT, get everything else in order, and then once your November LSAT score comes back, then apply with it. And you could have everything else ready to go. The second the November LSAT score comes back, hopefully it's what you want it to be. You've already gotten your personal statement, any other application essays, your recommendation letters, your resume, all set, loaded up, and ready to hit submit once that score comes back. And then that way, if that score isn't what you wanted it to be, you could then hold off on hitting submit and potentially deciding whether you want to retake the LSAT in January and apply then, or if you are happy, fantastic, apply right away. All the best to you. Keanu Reeves. Wow, I am honored, Keanu. I am a big fan of The Matrix. Can't say that I'm a fan of all of your movies, but you've made a lot. Didn't know you were applying to law school or just watching my videos for some strange reason. Can you do a video explaining joint degree programs? I don't really want to. And the reason is that there are so many different joint degree programs out there. They vary wildly in their requirements. And so some are JD MBA, some are JD MPH. There's a whole alphabet soup, tongue twister, a series of different joint degree programs out there. And I don't know that much about them in particular. They all, again, they vary a lot in their requirements, what they're asking for. Some might require the GRE in addition, some might require the GMAT in addition, and they have their own unique application essay requirements as well. And so I don't know too much about them because there are just so many of them and they vary so much. I can't say much more than that, really. If I ever do a discussion with someone or have a presentation with someone who does have experience in a particular area, of course, I'll be happy to have them talk more about that and share their thoughts on the nature of it. But I'd just be curious to know more about which specific joint degree programs you're talking about, because there are so many different ones out there. So if you want to follow up and ask more about that, I can see about maybe reaching out to some folks I know and seeing if they want to share more about that. But I guess I want to know more about what you want to know more about, because these details are pretty much generally available on the different university or colleges websites about the particular programs and their unique requirements. But in general, of course, having the best LSAT score possible and the best application essays possible certainly couldn't hurt, but I'd want to know more about what your goals were for your career, and that would better enable you to figure out which programs are right for you. But that's not something I could share too much about in particular. But anyway, thanks for reaching out. And so folks, these are 10 different comments I've gotten recently on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. I do keep an eye on the comments, but unfortunately I can't respond or reply to so many of them. And a lot of them are on videos that I'd have to dive back into and rewatch to get the context of what the question was about. Can't always do that. I'm focused more on creating new stuff rather than looking back at the old stuff. But I do read your comments. I do appreciate them and appreciate your watching, liking, subscribing, sharing, all of that good stuff. I'll keep watching for your comments, and I'll do another follow-up video like this in the future just to let you know I'm here, I'm reaching out. I'm happy to help however I can. So folks, keep at it, keep watching. All the best with your LSAT prep and law school admissions journey, and we'll be in touch. Take care. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.